parking management RFP. And we'll have Jonathan kick it off.
Well, Mayor and Council, this is kind of an exciting staff report because this is Maria's first project that she's worked on in the city. So she's done a really good job looking at both our parking management program and our building services department, and just thinking about what a scope of services for both of those departments might look like, and then thinking about kind of how we might want to think about managing parking, especially in the future. So for parking management, she has got a staff report for you. It's got a change log in there. I think I'm gonna let her take it away, and then I'll just be here to support, and any questions you have or anything that I can help with, I'll be here.
Mayor and Council, it's very exciting. Presenting my first project with the city. So like John said, we've spent the past several weeks looking into our parking management program and specifically our existing scope of service. So now that we have 5 years of managing paid parking under our belt and have had the opportunity to have several conversations with residents and our community stakeholders, we now have a better understanding of what our parking management needs look like and what needs to be modified looking towards the future. And we just wanted to get your feedback on some changes that we're considering making to the scope. These conversations are really coming at a very opportune time. If there are any changes that we want to make to the scope of service within our parking management operations, we want to have time to implement these changes before we get into the busy summer season. So like John said, there is a change log of everything that we have made within the staff report, but just to highlight some of our biggest changes, there was some pretty comprehensive language in the existing scope of services surrounding the website, which led to some changes within the existing website. So we just went ahead and simplified this language so that we could keep our website requirements open, which would allow us to modify it as needed to fit the city's needs. We also added some language that would require the contractor to collaborate with PD as needed for after-hours parking enforcement. And the biggest change was that we added some specific language regarding our customer service requirements. We added required response time for phone and email inquiries. And we also updated the scope to include the requirement of a supervisory personal presence within the city during paid parking hours in case patrons have questions. At the end of the day, all of these changes that we're making are really to align us with our goal of providing the best customer service possible. Interstate, who currently manages our paid parking, is a third-party contractor, and so it's really important that we have as much influence over the quality of customer service possible, despite the fact that we're not necessarily the ones that are administering it. We want to make sure that their employees are meeting the same customer service standards that city employees are expected to meet. And that was kind of the main goal with this, with these changes. So there are some certain aspects of the scope that staff is looking for council direction on. Do we want to just read them all and then go them or read them and then review?
Do you have a preference? Do you want her to? Why don't you go ahead and tell them, and then they can ask questions if they've got them.
Okay. So we have 4 aspects of the scope that we're looking for direction on. First, we want to consider whether the city wants to require that our contractor maintains a call and email log of interactions with customers and include it within the reporting requirements. Second is if the city wants to amend our section regarding grievances to add a specific response time for residential complaints. 3, does the city want to put parking fees within the city fee schedule so that it can be documented there? And finally, our current scope of service states that parking ambassadors are only authorized to write violations for paid parking infractions. And we want to know whether or not the contractor should be given the ability to write for code enforcement rules such as loading zone infractions, parking the wrong directions, etc.
All right, I'd like to take the last one first. And get council to weigh in on that one. It's a little prickly, but frankly, it could take some of the work off of Zach, for example. If people are parked, in a loading and unloading zone and they're just parked there, for an hour for no reason, or parking the wrong way. I have seen that frequently. And, Zach can't be everywhere all the time. And of course he does have days off and things. So it could help us. But I'd like to know what does council think about that? We have never, had a contractor do that before.
How do you anticipate it could get prickly?
Well, just because they have never done it before. And I imagine that there will be, some people question authority just out of nature. And the fact that these folks have never done this before. And now all of a sudden will be empowered to take that next step as far as things that are outside of like a parking fee.
I would agree with you, Mayor, that I think it may get prickly because parking tends to be sort of a prickly nature even now, 5 years in. And I think just from talking with staff and some of the parking ambassadors, that this kind of thing, taking it off of Zach's plate, like the loading zones, parking the wrong way or whatever, that is also one of our pain points. Like if you look at some of our frequent flyers in the complaint department, the loading zone is a problem. Like, I don't know that people know where loading zones are. But I would like to see that this is something that they do because I don't think that Zach can be everywhere. And I think that our parking requires more than just one enforcement officer.
All right, sounds good, Lisa. Kate, what do you think?
I kind of, excuse me, I follow with Lisa and you, Mayor, on the same thought. My only concern is, are we happy with the service that we had, that we have, and it sounds like we're kind of questioning that. And do we want to put more responsibility on their plate on top of that? So I guess it's like kind of like, yeah, I'm all for it if we're getting the service that we want, because I absolutely do think that I don't think Zach can be everywhere. And I myself, even though I think any one of us could call into the police department and report something weird, I don't think that we want to be in that position either. So I guess as long as the service is working, then I'm for it.
Yeah, and I'm of course gonna ask Chief to weigh in, but I wanted to see what council, how they felt about it. And I have to say, it isn't necessarily that Interstate isn't doing a good job. I think their people are trying pretty hard, but we do spend an inordinate amount of staff time, particularly dealing with parking violations, that you would have thought would have been taken care of on Interstate's end. And I'm not getting off topic. I'm gonna stick to the Zach aspect of this, but I am glad that we have a $50 per hour for staff time above and beyond in this scope. Because I think the amount of time, for example, that Jonathan has spent on this, I mean, just sometimes even on a daily basis, gets to be crazy. So that's something that could really be improved. I don't think myself that it would be overly burdensome. But again, I want to see how everybody feels, and I'm going to ask the chief for his input.
There may be one relevant point we didn't share with you.
Yeah.
When we write this RFP, we're going to put out for proposals, and one of the things we're going to do with it is have 2 alternative bids. So it would be possible to bid on just the technology solution for the city. It would also be possible to do a full service solution. And the reason that we need to do that is because not every parking company does what Interstate does.
Right.
And so to get the level of service, we may need to be a little bit flexible in how we go. So it could be potentially possible that there's an arrangement whereby the city has ambassadors. That's something that council would have to talk about further, I think. But if that's what happens and those are the proposals we get, we could come back with an idea for how that might work. Our intention would be to get a full service company in here. But I just wanted to say that might be something that becomes a differentiating factor. It may not be a third party that would be entitled to write those tickets if it could potentially be a city staff person too.
Exactly.
Can I interject again and say that, and I'm trying to stay on topic as well, because we're looking at expanding what we would like to see from either Interstate or whomever our contractor would be, is this something that we are considering looking at in-house? Because I don't know if it was Chuck or Jonathan brings up a good point about do we want to make the third party vendor, the person who's writing these violations, or do we, because these are city violations, do we want to make that city staffer and thus bring the parking in-house?
Well, Lisa, I think no matter how this goes, we absolutely are gonna weigh bringing it in-house. Because right now, for example, with a 50-50 split, I feel that the city is being overly generous. And I would, maybe I'll be corrected. But I would like to see what other bids come in at. But it'll give us a good yardstick to measure by when we see with reasonable service, what these bids or these requests for proposal come in at. Because we know we could take this in-house. We wouldn't have a revenue split, although as Jonathan said, we may have a technology fee, for example, to provide, kiosks and such. But I do think that we could control much tighter the customer experience if we were in-house.
Well, the reason I also asked that is that I did not know until I saw this updated proposal with all the track changes that the staff is allowed to charge $50 an hour. And I know that when I talk to people, I'm like, oh, if you have a parking problem, call Jonathan. I didn't realize that that should actually go to Interstate, which that's taking away from our city staff time, and we don't really have enough staff to be handing out extra assignments. So, I think if we stick with this, like the Interstate or whomever the parking is, they've got to be the ones that are taking care of this. Like, this can't keep coming on our staff, or they have to be charged appropriately because this is taking up a lot of our staff time.
The reason that we do it the way we do it right now is because, and I'm going to speak frankly as the person who's been doing the majority of this work, is that I cannot control the customer service experience people have at Interstate. I can 100% control the customer service experience they have at City Hall. And what I would like to do, and kind of what Maria has been writing into the scope, is either tools that let us better manage a contractor, or tools that give us the ability, were we to take it in-house and hire more staff to do it. I think it's important to remember that paid parking right now grosses about $1 million a year. Mm-hmm. That's enough money to hire staff potentially and have a good staff that we can make sure, and we talk about this a lot at City Hall. What would the goals for City Council be for our customer service that we give every day? And it lets us put this team into those same roles so that we can control the outcomes a little bit better than we can now. I'll give you an example. There was a lady on the street, the Interstate ambassador told her that they were going to give her a ticket because she missed paying. It was 5:15 and paid parking is over at 6, and she couldn't get the kiosk to work and she was getting upset. I can just be like, hey, the city loves that you're here and visiting. Why don't you let me take care of your parking today and you just go enjoy your dinner with your kids? That's something that I can do, or like if I have a little bit more authority over staff, I can have them do, and it doesn't cost the city a dime. Interstate just doesn't always currently have the same priorities as staff, and it doesn't mean they're doing anything wrong. It's just that they have different priorities at the moment, and we need to make the scope of service for any contractor align better to what our goals as a community are, I think. And so that's kind of where we were going with this scope of service, I think, a little bit. And that's why we have that $50 fee in there, so that we have something to hold them accountable if that happens. And it does happen more than it should. We also want to be able to give people a chance to go to court for a ticket. That's a really important part of our program, even though it doesn't happen very often. And that's a way that we can control for court costs if that does happen, where they're not able to fix the situation.
Well, I like the idea that it would give us greater control over customer service, because as far as anybody visiting here, as far as people that live here know, the city and parking are one and the same. It's not two separate entities.
Yep, I agree. Janine, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I just had a question about with that addition of the moving violations, is that what they're called? Are those tickets? Like, is there a revenue?
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do moving violations, and Chief can weigh in on this. I was thinking more specifically about parked the wrong way and loading zone infractions, or maybe double parked. But I guess that's a question we haven't really vetted out fully either, so.
And Jeremy, what are your thoughts?
How much do we bring in violations a year now?
Violation revenue of this year was 144,000. there was some issues with how it was distributed, and this is something we need to work out as well. We're supposed to get 35% of net violation revenue minus transaction fees, essentially. And that's something that I think we need to flesh out a little bit.
And I just wanted to add, the reason why Interstate gets almost double what we do is because we acknowledge there's more work, with collections, for example. So what we weren't anticipating is for them to get double on the ticket revenue and then have to devote a bunch of staff time to try and to, resolve matters. Because that often is what happens.
That's kind of my point too, when you incentivize a company per se. So, for example, 45 minutes, right? If I write them a violation, that's probably gonna make me more than 45 minutes for the parking, it's gonna make me for my percentages. That's kind of where I have my issues with parking. I think violations should be written by a city employee. I think that should be 100% revenue to the city. I think an employee should have the right to have some discretion. Because I think when we lose our ability they need to be able to evaluate the situation and work with, whether especially residents or business owners, to come up with a fair and equitable solution to the end. Because if your whole purpose currently interstate is enforcement, you're parked in a loading zone, here's your ticket. Which is really counterproductive long term for it doesn't improve behavior. We've kind of proven this in other realms. Versus being collaborative, hey, you really can't park here. Oh man, you're right, my mistake. Most of the time they don't do it. It's not a repetitive behavior past that point. And that generates support for parking and support for the city versus if you write a ticket every single time, hey, you're in the yellow zone, I've been here for 4 minutes. Doesn't matter, your yellow zone, here's your ticket. That's completely counterproductive to the long-term viability of the program because you lose support from the community, even whether it's a tourist or a local or a business owner. I think my push here is, yes, somebody taking the money would make sense. With the kiosk and QR codes and all the stuff we can do to improve that makes sense. But bring the enforcement in-house. And a perfect example of this is 2-3 days ago, his sergeant had to go up to look at a handicap parking violation, probably in the middle of whatever he was doing, because he was in front of the senior center. And they call, I understand it, they take that very personal, and rightfully so, they should. But what's that staff time cost? There's no cost recovery for the delay to do that and the delay getting back to whatever he was in the middle of it. That he has to get done also during his day. Well, I think that's another argument for why moving towards city employees, which would be what, 4 employees, 2 per day, then you have some coverage just to get coverage. And then train them well and empower them to be ambassadors for the city and be collaborative to work with the business owners and the residents and the tourists. I think we'll see less pushback on parking and probably a better parking.
Well, and I absolutely agree with Lisa with her point about parking folks and the city are one and the same.
Yeah.
So when we have where we really are lacking with the customer experience is with the violations. We got $144,000 of which we yield very little of that. So we're actually, I'm saying we're parting with enough money, fully burdened, at least 2 staff people right there. Even if we were to bring that revenue down, because maybe we're not overly zealous with writing the tickets. You could, I'm sure pay for a couple people right there, but then you have a much better customer experience because like Jonathan was saying, we control it. It's a lot easier for us to control that and have some reasonable expectations within house. And just real quickly, Phil Weiser was taking on a new issue where there was a lawsuit in Avon. There's a company based out of Aurora, and they were giving tickets pretty frequent for people that didn't have time to get in the system and pay to park. So you can have a sign up, for example, that says there's a 15-minute grace period. but you have to give 20. So even if the sign says 10 or 15, you have to give 20. But Jeremy, to what you were saying about incentivizing sometimes, I believe sometimes you run the risk when you're holding dough out there for a company, like you can collect 65% of everything that you can find with violations. It probably does influence if you're given a full 20 minutes or what have you for folks.
Citations have been right on the nose of 5% of transactions since the beginning of the program.
I see.
It's barely ever varied.
Right.
And that tells you something right there, I think.
It's how you cover your expenses as a company. And I think there's other thing to think about is one bad transaction, whatever that is, and this is if I've upset the chief, for example, by giving him a ticket, he's gonna tell 10 people that I've said,
100%.
right? Those 10 people are gonna tell a version of that to 10 people respectively. We know this. So if we avoid that initial transaction as being a bad experience, that's where you start seeing the long-term benefit of the program. And repeat customers, people willing to come back, people not telling their friends, guess what happened when I went to Idaho Springs last weekend? Or we stopped after skiing and we got a ticket for this, can you believe it? There's a negative effect of sales tax, return visits, all that stuff that comes out of that. And it's exponential, it grows very quickly. So I think that's where the basis becomes good customer service, bring it in-house as best we can, a good budget. And just improve that experience, which should improve support for the parking garage. And all the stuff, the residential parking program and stuff, I think there's support to be garnered from those programs if we do it right, that maybe we're missing right now.
Chief, I intentionally asked for you to go last just because you do carry a lot of weight on this subject, and I wanted to get everybody's honest feelings about it. So,
okay.
What do you think about if we did, say, for example, take some pressure off Zach and maybe, if we had a vendor help out with people parking the wrong direction or in a loading zone, what do you think?
I would not be opposed to that. I think that a lot of other entities do things like that with, in these situations. And also it should be important for folks to know too. I mean, our officers write those citations too. So I see those citations coming through our department for parking the wrong way and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I know they're doing that when they're out patrolling. As far as potentially bringing it in-house, I'm not opposed to that either. One of the things that concerns me would be, or my recommendation would be, that it fall under its own separate entity versus falling under the police department.
Yeah.
And there's a few reasons for that, but that would be my recommendation, that it would be its own standalone entity. And we can certainly work cooperatively with that group, but versus being necessarily a police department function.
Yeah, we don't want to escalate. I believe that if we take it in-house, the best thing to do would be to hire a coordinator or manager type position. That would be kind of like your FTE. And then there's probably room, like you said, for 4 total employees, but in the summertime, it's gonna be a little higher, in the wintertime, a little less. So you probably could get a couple of, depending on what they're doing, it might even be able to be like a senior in high school, unless there's some kind of thing that would preclude that. But you could maybe have a couple of really good summertime jobs and then maybe 2 FTEs or a part-time person and a full-time person. And they could be here potentially, or, we have office space for them, and they would work just like another city department, essentially, not a department, they'd be like either within administration or like a quasi department or something. And then they would have goals and strategies just like all of us, and we would just manage them. And that would make sure that we don't have to have, it's maybe not the right interaction. I know what you're saying, Chief, on that part for sure. I mean, it's a thing that makes, you're going to be dealing with people who you really need a really good customer service person, because you're going to be dealing with somebody who's mad at you before you even talk. So you need somebody who can diffuse and has the tools that they need to make people happy and have a good time when they're here, and still respect our residential areas. And part of it is we are going to have to give citations for time violations, because that's kind of the basis of how we keep bikers from staying here for days on end. So there's gotta be some balance there, but I think we could do it.
It's interesting. Parking, as we all know, it can bring out the worst in people when they see that parking ticket. But we also have to remember there are certain people that may come to Idaho Springs. Specifically, I remember stories and have been a part of stories where, like on the 4th of July, people are parking illegally and we're telling them you cannot do that. You get a ticket, and they say, give me my ticket.
Right, how much
I'm
is the
parking
ticket?
here.
Yeah.
It's my $50 ticket. I'll pay that ticket. I just consider it the cost of coming and enjoying the fireworks show. So, and there were multiple people that did that, like multiple.
Wow.
And so there is that on occasion that happens. And I agree with Jonathan fully about if you are going to set rules as far as time limitations and paying, it's only going to be as good as really what the potential consequence is for not following that. So I agree with that. I also agree that if we do something like that, certainly those people, if we were to go in-house, can be empowered and I believe legally allowed to issue citations for other parking violations. For instance, when somebody parks the wrong way right here by City Hall, it only takes a few minutes, then everybody else starts parking the wrong way by City
Right.
Hall. So I know that people see that work here. So if you have a few more sets of eyes on that, if you get the first person maybe cited, then the other people don't park the wrong way. So that's my opinion on it. There's really no way to make everybody happy with parking management. But I do think the city has done a pretty good job of that. And I believe the current vendor does a fairly good job as well. I just think that there could be some benefit to having a little bit more control of what's going on.
And by the way, I think everybody knows, I'm not sure, Janine, if you know, but we do an even Steven split on that parking revenue. So, you know, if it's $660,000, that literally is $250,000 that we gave to Interstate. And I bring this up because, as Jonathan is alluding to, we believe that it'll probably be $1 million. Well, that would be a $500,000 split. That does not include the 65% that they currently take on the violation side. So
But
if anyone were to wonder, where would the money come from for staff, you know, it's right there. Please, Kate.
two things. So the staff is is a huge concern. But my first question is, how would we lease the kiosks? Would that, and then the technology for the kiosks? I mean, how much does that cost a year? Number one, and then also, like you've all said, parking is a sticky situation, and no offense to all the high school students that I've met in my 58 years, but having been in customer service my entire life, I would say that I'm not going to put a newbie into the situation where I have literally seen people come to blows over parking. Like, it's that ridiculous. And I don't know, Chief, if it's been in our town, but like, it can get dangerous. And I wouldn't want to, I think you have to be kind of a little bit service savvy for that kind of high profile confrontational situation. So there are my two statements, but mostly like, well, they're even, but how much would the leasing of the kiosks run us?
Yeah.
Well, and Kate, that's why we would like to put the request for proposal out with just the technology side out there in case we did decide to bring it in-house. We would like to get bids for that. And I think Jonathan, you know, quite understandably sized up that we would have to hire the right people, because you're right. You can't have a thin skin or lack of experience to be in a position like that.
I'll do it.
I mean, I've literally had guns pulled on me.
I think I'd
and
be great at it, actually.
I don't even know how many death threats I've had over parking, but your point is well taken. It's not a high schooler job. I was more thinking like from the ambassador standpoint, but you're right. It's somebody who needs to be specially trained and have resources available, you know,
Conflict management, I mean, there's all kinds of
PTSD at
stuff that
times
go
too,
along
like,
with it.
you need to be able to talk to people and have a pretty healthy mental attitude about it. So you're 100% right on that. But the technology piece, there's a lot of companies that will lease the technology and completely manage it. And they'll do the coding and take care of the equipment, and we can just say, hey, this kiosk is old, please replace it. And I want to say, Chief has talked to a couple too, because we've been kind of working on this for a little while. And it's like a percentage, it's basically a percentage, because those kiosks are expensive. We may potentially be able to work more effectively with less kiosks. We're starting to see the kiosks not get used very frequently. And they were recently vandalized at a tune of about $40,000 total. So it could benefit us to like look at some other solutions. But I think one thing we want to do is make sure there's always a way to pay cash and like deal with people who don't have the resource right there. And so we could figure that out. I think that's something we could do either way, really. So we just got to figure out how we want to do it.
Breckenridge has less kiosks, but they have a good program.
Yeah. Arvada is doing that now too, where it's mostly touchless.
Mm.
There's even ones where you can just text a number and then it takes care of it. So you don't have to have an app or anything.
And I'm just curious, what you have?
I just had a question on whether or not the new parking plan would cover, say, the entire town or just the historic district parts.
Right.
Or issues that we would have parking
Great question.
the historic district.
Right now, the parking management plan has two parts. So it has residential permit area and then it has a commercial parking area. I don't foresee the commercial parking area growing, although we recently have been discussing how we manage what we currently call our fee and lieu program, like in places where, because it's really only for the historic district, but there's places where they need more parking that we might need to think about parking more creatively in the future. So there probably is some places around the city that could use that program, but I don't think we put paid parking in on the east end anytime in the near future. As far as residential parking goes, it's really intended to be near the commercial districts, like places where people would park, like when they're going to Marion's or some, or not Marion's, like Main Street or something like that, where like they may be just trying to skip out on the paid parking and go park somewhere. But I do know that the impacts have been higher in some areas of town since that's happened, like people are finding different places to go. So if that was something that residents on a certain block, or that's how we've handled it in the past, is we've had requests from residents to turn a block paid or to permit only. And that is something that we put in the parking plan, which is adopted by ordinance. So we could add more areas to that plan if we wanted to at any time. And we've just typically handled that, like when residents say, hey, my street's getting overrun or whatever, we need to add the street on, and then we do that. And then we just a matter of signing, basically.
Right, well, you had mentioned like,
Need something
Yeah.
besides what he has, because you currently have a parking problem, and that's the entire 6 blocks around your house.
well, yeah, say like somebody, you talked about like somebody that could come and help out Zach with just kind of like watching the streets and saying, you know, hey, you know, this guy's parked in the middle of the road, or there's a bunch of abandoned vehicles parked about that, you know.
Some of that,
Whose cars are these?
That still would be code enforcement.
yeah,
That would still fall under our purview with Zach.
Okay,
That's one of his primary responsibilities, and it just takes the burden of dealing with, I guess, the historic district, you know, away from it being one of his big priorities.
Right.
That would be the benefit is he's not worried about this,
Then he would be.
he has more time to worry about exactly what you and I both know we're talking about here.
yes,
Which is becoming a growing issue on the east end of town. Among other places, there's some stuff in it also.
Yeah.
right, and it would help out that, you know, that somebody that was local that actually worked with us, that could have discretion on, you know, hey, you know, we know whose car that is, but it's not in the way, you know.
Right, and I have story after story of Zach working directly with people,
Mhm.
you know, and saying, well, I'll give you a few extra days, you need to move this, or it's gonna be tagged, and that's almost a daily thing for him. So,
All right, Maria, I started with the last one first, just because that was gonna be the toughest one, and I'm sorry, would you go back to the first one?
So the first request for direction we had was, does the city want to require that the contractor maintain a call and email log of interactions with customers and include it within the reporting requirements?
Okay, what do you think, Jeremy?
I would say yes, because it gives you a paper trail or some record of that interaction. That way, when they get to him, for example, after that interaction, you at least got something to say, what was said, when did it happen, when they contacted.
Okay, well, Jeremy is a real statistics guy and so am I, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Janine?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's good to have that data.
Okay. Kate, what do you think?
I'm on board with that. As long as it doesn't create a huge amount of work for the staff, I'm fine with that.
Okay, and Lisa, what are your thoughts?
I think absolutely, because I think that's part of the problem that I've heard from people is that there is not a detailed log of who talked to who, when, why, and how. Like, there's no way to, hey, I did talk to them, I did pay it, whatever. My only concern would be if we end up staying with our current, parking provider, our vendor, that doesn't add to what they are charging us, because I know that there have been some questions about like how the charges are broken down. And I think that this should be something that is a standard, not an extra.
I think an RFP will be standard, right?
Yeah,
Be part of the it would be part of the contract, as I understand it, in the RFP, therefore. It's a mandate, you will provide this
Yep.
service if you wish to pursue this. And then you bid your cost and we select the cost out of that. But
Yeah, and I think
Should be part of that.
if they construct it right, it won't necessarily be a lot of extra work,
it shouldn't be that hard to log those interactions.
right?
would help significantly to understand when contact happened and what might have happened as a
Well,
result.
now you kind of got a better yardstick to measure by with how we doing, Maria, what was the second?
Does the city want to amend the section regarding grievances to add a specific response time for residential complaints?
It's kind of just overlooked in our current contract. They respond in the residential area, but again, it's just a tracking issue, really.
Okay, I would think everybody would be for that. Is anyone against it? Okay, all right,
Also solves one of our problems.
yeah, right. I mean, obviously, we want people on our side, so.
Hey, I've got a question on that note. Is there any way to remind people that perhaps their registration is up,
Yeah,
like
this
their
has been.
car not being registered?
It's
Because
an ongoing.
I get,
problem.
I'm at the library, so I'm like an open season. When you come in to get a book, you have got Kate right there to complain to. So I think this lady talked to me, I should say it this way, for 45 minutes the other day about our parking situation. And I was just wondering if there's a way to remind them, hey, your thing is almost due, click here, bingo banga boom, and you're good to go again.
Yeah, I think it's actually in the contract that they're supposed to do that right now, and that's one of the compliance areas that we have, because they haven't come
Yeah,
up with.
never had that done myself.
Yeah, they are trying to, if you were to say, write an email to ISInfo and ask them if it's registered, they would tell you. But what is supposed to happen is there's an automated portal that lets you do it, and there is a way to do it. And that needs to be rectified under this new contract for whomever it is. But I agree with you, that's a pretty major thing. The other thing that we don't have that needs to happen is you can't look up, it's not very easy to contest a ticket on their website. It's not designed properly where you can just say, I contest this ticket. And so that's another thing along the same lines that the new contract is gonna, it needs, like you said, Jeremy, the requirement needs to be met.
Kate, thank you for asking, because I doubt if any of us have any idea how close we are to the 2-year limit. I don't know, maybe I'm past.
They're,
I'm positively sure I don't care anymore.
Oh, really?
We got one this year.
Wow.
they send them out, it's not,
I was totally shocked.
was it a group email or was it a?
It went to her email address and said, the following to your registration need to be
Oh.
renewed, and we went, oh,
Phenomenal,
and we actually get it, because normally we forget.
right?
But, you know, I didn't put a reminder on my phone, I will do that.
Oh, that's
We actually
great.
got one, I was like, this is great.
Great. Now, if it would just work for everybody,
Yeah.
problem solved.
And that is something that does happen. Not everybody wants to put all their personal information in there.
Yeah.
That helps us a lot if we have email and we don't always even have names. So sometimes we're just like, oh, it's a westbound employee. And so that's another thing we gotta work on, but
All right, Maria, the third item.
Does the city want to put parking fees in the city fee schedule so that it can be documented there?
the reason for this is right now it's in the contract, but our contracted, what we're charging for parking isn't correct for what is in the city. I don't anticipate our fees are ever gonna go up. They may possibly go down at some point. And I guess I didn't say they're never gonna go up, but that would be far down the road because we are covering the costs we need to cover right now. So what I was thinking is if we put it in the city fee schedule, that's also adopted by ordinance and it makes it official. And then we don't have to update the contract in the future if we change the fee schedule.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I'm a little surprised it's not already in there.
What specifically are you gonna put in the fee schedule?
Just like the hourly rates.
The hourly rate.
Yeah.
And that should be
And-
part of your fee
yeah.
schedule by, I want to say by statute, it's supposed to be part of your fee schedule.
I know that,
Because we have to adopt every fee that we charge.
yeah, I think there was a reason. It's something to do with the contractor why it's not, but I think we need to,
Hmm.
I think it's a better
But in your
practice.
contract, it just say reflect, current adopted rates.
Right,
Which, that way, if they were to change, you don't rewrite the contract.
And we do have in here that they'll be given at least 60 days notice.
correct.
So I think that'd be a real good idea to have in there in the. fee
Yeah, that way
schedule.
when people look up the fee schedule for the city, whatever it is, and water rates and parking areas X. Okay,
Right.
great, and then on a single document, it's cleaner.
Rate citations are, or notice of violations, we call them, are different than the regular city citation. It's $50, and the reason why it's $50 is because that was set to the amount a day of parking was, so it's basically like if you didn't pay, you just paid for a day of parking.
Right.
We might be able to modify that down a little bit now that we just modified the fee structure a little bit, but that's the same thing, is we'd want to have that number in there too. And that's what it should be, is just like a day of parking is what we had kind of intended.
Lisa, would you be all right with the parking rate being in the fee schedule?
I think, and I know we're updating the website, I think the more things that people can go to our website and see what our fees are, so that you know, like, and they're right there, and I know we talked about click a button, here's the fees. I think if we have that adopted as our code and people can find it and they don't have to look at our parking contract, the better. I would like to add, and you know, this may be a hobby horse that I need to stop riding, but I would like to know if we're going to do a parking, like a parking committee where we bring in our citizens and let them talk about what has worked and what has not. I realize that that might be the subject of some groaning, but I really think in the idea of helping to better improve our relationship with parking and the people in the city, that's something that we need to look at as we're renegotiating this contract.
Yeah, I know we have been talking about getting it going again in 2024. Jonathan, as far as a parking group, citizen input.
Yeah, it's something we've been talking about a lot of Vitality Task Force too, and it's something that I think we want to do that concurrently with this process. It was just, summer comes awfully fast, and so we wanted to get this piece moving too. So that's something that I think when we did it last, we solicited letters and then council appointed them, and I don't know if that's what we want to do this time, but we could bring forward that process if you guys want to do it now or however you guys want to do it. But I agree with Lisa, it's something
What
I think
about-
we can.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
What about like a town hall situation where it can be anybody that just wants to come in and you don't have, I don't know what it is about certain towns, but they don't want to join, but they want to be heard. Like just a simple town hall, like, hey, we're talking about parking this week. Come in, like what's working for you and what doesn't. And anonymous note, paid parking in any town to me is like the absence of pain after like knee surgery. The only people that notice the pain are the people paying the parking ticket. I don't notice the fact on a daily basis I don't have anybody parked in front of my house so that I can't. Do you know what I mean? So people that might be affected are not being affected, so they're not going to come in and go, "Yay for paid parking." But we have to imagine that they are out there. So we got to take a grain of salt with the people that are kind of negative about it. So that's I just think, I think getting people to do groups is difficult, but if it's just like a town hall every 6 months or so, we might get a bigger turnout.
And Kate, I wanted your input on do you think the parking rate should be in our fee schedule?
Sure, 100%. I personally do not want it to decrease though. I fully support
Oh.
the $50 and I've defended it wildly up to other people. So I'm on that horse until it dies.
All right, all right, very good. I think we covered all of the items that, staff needed direction on, correct?
Okay, well, our next steps are to finalize the RFP, and like I said, we're gonna have an alternate, so you can either bid on technology or a full service solution. I have already, I've done a little bit of research. Chief found a person who's interested in potentially putting in a proposal from last year, so I talked to them again, and then there's several other companies around Denver. And so the intention would be RFP, that stays out. Typically, we do at least a month on our RFPs, and we want to make sure we get a good response. We can also send those to contractors we know of, which is as long as it's the same information for everybody. When those come back, staff will collect them, do all the information, and then we bring back a proposal to council based on what we found. And you probably will have alternatives if there's both kinds of proposals, then we would figure out which solution you guys want to do at that time. And then as far as the parking task force, we've had community meetings about parking too. We could do both potentially if that's something you guys want to do. And those have been our most well-attended meetings by far. So I think either one would be great.
I would
And
like.
then
to
other-
see-
oh, sorry.
I thought you were done. I apologize. No, go ahead.
Oh, there's just one more thing. The contract, just to remember, the scope of service is what we're asking for. The contract is what we negotiate. So we can potentially, if there's things in the parking task force that come up or the community meetings, we can always add those to the contract. And I bet we'll have, some success doing that. So we still have a chance to inform this policy.
How would it work about like the in-house option? Would that be assessed in the same time or?
Yeah, we would probably bring to you a staff report that kind of shows all the options and kind of breaks down costs. And then we would do a little bit of initial vetting just to kind of see, we'll have a score sheet rubric that we use that's pretty standardized for the city. You don't have to select the lowest price contractor in Idaho Springs, but you do have to have a nexus for why, if that's why. So we would bring to you a staff report and probably have a work session like this, and then you guys could determine which alternative you liked better, and then that's kind of how we would determine direction.
All right, anything more on this subject before we move to the next?
Actually, Mayor, I do have one last thing.
Sure.
I would like us, like, this is our work session. I would love to see like next month's work session be available for people to come and just do an open forum conversation with us. Like, I don't know if you guys pay attention to our Facebook group, but parking is the thing where it's like you're dropping dynamite into a barrel of gas. Like, it doesn't matter what the subject is, it brings out so much discontent that I feel like before we negotiate, a new contract or update our current contract, we really need to hear from people that are not happy or have had negative experiences. Now, if they don't show up, that's on them. But if we can set a time in the next like 6 weeks so that it allows members of city council to let the public know, I think that would be a good thing.
The only thing I'd say is that's probably a hour to hour and a half meeting. And I want to make sure it fits with whatever else is on the schedule. And Andy is just out of town right now. So if we could get back to you on like just schedule wise when a longer work session like that would make sense, I think we could do that as soon as he's back, if that's okay.
That's totally fine. I do have one question, Jonathan. When is our contract with Interstate up?
It's a rolling contract. So the city's only legally allowed to enter a year contract, but it can turn over. So we need to give 30 days notice on our current contract, and that can happen at any time.
Okay.
Can I add on to Lisa?
I just wanted to say that I think from a practical standpoint, no matter what we decide, we probably would not want a transition in the middle of our busy summer season, for example. So we probably, I'm saying would, let it ride until we get to a slower time when it would make sense for some type of a transition. If we decided to either do it in-house or go with another contract, it'd be a lot smoother.
Can I add on to
anything,
Lisa really quick, Chuck? Sorry.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Yeah, so Lisa, I love you that idea. It's sort of the same thing as kind of having a little bit of an open forum under the discussion of parking. It also gives council and Jonathan and Chief and anybody else that wants to mention it, the reasons why we charge what we do and why we have the restrictions that we do. it gives us time to validate to the group that actually probably is the most outspoken. So that would be a great opportunity for us.
All right. All right, thank you. Anything further? All right, well, the last thing on our work session is building services request for proposal.
Mayor and Council, Maria had to leave. She worked on this staff report too, but she had a prior engagement. So I'll just kind of take it. We've had our building to services department, which is called Safe Built. It's a contractor and they've been in place since 2013. We don't really have a scope of service for the work that they do in the city, but in general, it's a pretty full-fledged building department. They come, they do building reviews for permits. They help work on issuing permits, work on a number of different land use cases for the city. I think in 2013, when Safe Built came to the city, there was a different kind of level of activity happening. And I think the level of service that they were able to provide was different. As we've kind of gone into post-COVID times and things are moving a lot faster, we're finding again that the customer service is not necessarily where we need it to be. And that's not because they're doing a bad job, but I think it's just because what we require as a city and what we expect as a city, it's just a faster paced environment. And there's just different things that need to happen. And so what we really need is a scope of service that kind of talks about that and kind of presents a level of service that we expect from our building department. There's some big projects that could be on the horizon. One thing that's been happening frequently at these projects that we really need to correct is you'll have the building department may come out to a site to like do an inspection, find one thing wrong and then leave. Well, that costs the person a lot of money and time in their project because they're not able to like have a full, punch list of things that they need to work on as they're going. So as an example, in our bathroom, there was something in the ceiling. There was an interpretation about whether it should fail code at the time that it was seen or if it was needed, like a whole bunch of different stuff that basically happened. But it ended up delaying the project 2 weeks. And on some of these big projects, that's a lot of money. And, we do need to fail projects when they need to fail. But if we could give people a punch list so that they could kind of be really judicious with the money they're spending, it would be better. Another issue we're having that really affects Idaho Springs is we have a historic city. There's a lot of buildings in this city that are going to be what they're going to be, and they're existing buildings by code. A lot of times we'll get into situations where Safe Built tries to say that they need to meet new building code, which is just unreasonable for some of these buildings. We've actually gotten into all the way to hearings on certain issues where, for instance, maybe there's an ADA accessible path to a bathroom outside of a building, which is a acceptable code outcome in some cases, where they were trying to have an ADA accessible bathroom put into a building that doesn't even have public use, where it's completely impossible to put it in without destroying the building. The same thing has happened on ramps. There's buildings downtown where if you put an accessible ramp in, it would go out into the middle of the street.
Oh, yeah.
And so what we need to do is find contextual ways to work with the code to make sure our buildings are accessible. Our bathrooms here at City Hall are a good example of that. We're doing an ADA project on here in a historic building, and I think we've found a pretty good way to make sure that it happens. But we need to be able to work with our building department in that way. Another thing is staff needs to be able to send referrals to them and work with them when we have land use cases that do require building things. We have a pretty good planning staff, but we don't necessarily always know what the wind shear on a shed is going to be. We know what the code says it should be, and we need to be able to get our residents to the building department in the right way so that projects can come together and keep moving. And so what we would like to do is put out for bid our building services. And again, this is something that we may need to do some alternatives to look at. There's been some talk about maybe we need a regional building department. Maybe the city and Georgetown could partner on a company that could be here all the time and provide a consistent level of service to people. Maybe there's a way to partner with the county on it as well. Those conversations could continue to be worked out, but kind of similar to this case with parking, having an RFP for a building management company that could do what we basically have Safe Built doing now could really benefit the city, especially as we have these projects coming online. One would be 4 Points. They're going to have 120 apartment units, and the way that it goes right now, the inspections on 120 units could take forever, and we need to be able to build ways to like work on these projects that are coming online in a way that'll get them done effectively, but still make sure that we're safe. And I want to be clear, I don't think Safe Built is doing anything that's making people unsafe. They're just, we just need to work on the scope of service a little bit. And even if they were the ones that took it, I think this would benefit us just to have a little bit clearer relationship with how this all works between us and them. So that's kind of what you have in front of you. The scope of service for parking is much more complicated and much more fleshed out because we've been doing it a long time. This one was a little harder for Maria to write because there was nothing to work from. So we've been working from couple different communities in Colorado, and we have a couple of questions in there. And we wanted to give council a chance to kind of weigh in on this and say what you think is important, or if there's anything that you didn't see that you'd like to see. So I think I've talked enough about it. I just wanted to kind of tee it up that we have some more room for flexibility here, I think.
Jonathan, speaking of flexibility, I had told Maria, I personally would like to see this bid 2 ways. A Monday through Friday availability bid. And then 2 days a week, which is what we currently have. And the reason why I would like to see that bid both ways, because we all know we don't have enough work just within the city limits of Idaho Springs, to mandate a full-time person, and maybe there's a huge cost break at being available 2 days a week. So I'd like to see that.
Okay.
But in all fairness, if this is something that we explore, maybe even later on, about bringing in-house, if we were brought in-house and say we were to work with Georgetown and or the county, we would have what would then be 5 day a week availability, right? So we could compare that with the bid for a Monday through Friday, 5 day a week availability, right?
Yeah, and I think that's another good point, is that we could bring the new person in-house. That could still happen even just in Idaho Springs. And that person would be paid for out of building department fees. We do pay it. I don't know what the annual payment to.
There's about $100,000.
Okay.
I think it might have been 101,000 to be exact, was budgeted for 2024 for building inspection this year, just for the city limits, right? So while that may not be enough to get a building inspector fully burdened, it's getting close. And if we were to partner even with a smaller partner, say for example at Georgetown, there's more than enough money there to bring somebody in full time and have available.
Who is the county? Who is the county in Georgetown using? Who are the county in Georgetown using at this point in time?
Georgetown uses Safe Built, and they're having this exact same conversation as we speak. The county has their own department.
And Empire is.
So I mean, so the
Oh,
county
yeah.
opportunity is actually, the county opportunity sounds good because that would be an individual, job, right?
It could be, and I think that we probably have, from a pooled resources perspective and in terms of work, it probably would make a lot of sense because they could probably have enough work for a full-time person and we'd have enough money to support them because there's a couple other things they need, like they need a truck and some basic tools and things like that. So, it might, it could work out in that way.
And I think that if we were a new community like a Highlands Ranch, Safe Built would probably go a lot smoother, where it's more cookie cutter. But here, and this is true for the county and, at large in Georgetown, these are very much one-off custom commercial that, are unlike things that maybe many inspectors have seen before. They're all custom homes, where it's not very, very cookie cutter. And I just think that they do have a harder time. And I know Jeremy has seen a lot of this just with your background, with different inspections and things.
Yeah, I think the fight, no matter what we do, I think that's part of the is them understanding the existing building code and historic building, how the historic buildings relate to the existing building code. And yeah, the fight with 88, a perfect example. Codes, it's on the federal side, it says if the building was not designed with an elevator to access the second floor in an existing building, you don't have to do 88 second floor. Yet we fight, and other people in the community continue to fight with Safe Built over 88 compliance on the second floor of non-accessible structures, and that delays or either delays or precludes them from even doing their project because they can't get over the plan review section of the cost. So whatever we do needs to be something that works better for the city. we can still build safely, but I think putting some timelines in place and eliminating a lot of these, I guess, hindrances that cause problems to the residents or commercial development is in our favor.
A lot of these firms also have automated processes that you can build into our new website. We have this really cool new community development planning website that's going to come online with the new site that's being built. And the building department could have like all the permits be expedited, so everything's uploaded online, applications are filled out. It would save a lot of staff time, and I think from a customer service experience, it would be much better because it would be easy.
Everybody wants to go to electronic prints.
Yeah.
Lately. That's from my experience. That's kind of the way the future's going to go is electronic submittals. So having a process that makes that clean for contractors or owners, or even residents just trying to put a water heater in.
Oh, yeah.
Could be a nightmare under the current situation. But I think this is at least the first step towards maybe remedying some of those problems.
All right, Jonathan, what further direction do you need?
Only question is what's kind of laid out there. I know it's a little basic, but I think we'll have some more opportunity in the contract to flesh it out. I didn't know if there's anything, you had mentioned the two different alternative bid structures. I didn't know if there's anything else you guys might want to see in this or in this scope of service other than that.
I thought it was pretty well covered. I mean,
Okay.
it was obvious to me that Maria spent a lot of time doing her homework on this one, for sure. And I don't know, anything further? Lisa or
I
Kate?
think it's a great opportunity for a possible local position for both the county and the city. So I look forward to whatever you guys propose.
I would agree with that. In there, when you're talking about commercial permits and there was discussion about breaking it down into more specific, like she found in other cities, I would go for that because I think one of the things, and I'm saying this as somebody that's been through the permitting process lately, as well as talking to other people, the more specific and detailed we can get, I think it's better for people. So they're very clear on where they need to go. I think it also makes it easier for staff to answer questions that they get if we are very specific within the code. I would be very much in favor of what can we do with the other municipalities like Georgetown, or maybe I think Jeremy said something about Empire. Like, how do we work with other, municipalities in this county, even if it's not the county, because the Tuesday, Thursday thing is a pain in the neck.
Yeah, and I will I'll let folks know if they didn't already know that Lynette Kelsey, the police judge / mayor in Georgetown, she spent about 22 years with the county in the building department, and she is extremely knowledgeable about this stuff. And I've just had some initial discussions with her where it's obvious to me they would be interested in perhaps sharing someone to get this done.
That's the same feedback I had talking to her.
Oh, good.
Code officials talking to code officials for fun.
Oh, yeah.
We think it's fun.
Absolutely.
And then Empire's the same situation. They currently contract with the county because it's assessment. I think they would contract with whichever was most convenient. There's a lot of opportunity here. And I think when you do your 2 day a week, I think if you could split your 2 days up, it's like a Monday and a Thursday. Because what we have talking to contractors, they come inspect on Tuesday, they get me in the afternoon on Tuesday, and then I'm scrambling on Wednesday to make changes to get inspection on Thursday. Otherwise, that project's delayed for them. By giving a couple days between those 2 days, it allows them to get things caught up, or at least to code, so they can have another second follow-up inspection the same week, and it doesn't adversely affect their project schedule.
Yep.
Because we've got a lot of feedback from different contractors, and that's almost a nightmare. If something, one little thing is wrong.
Oh, yeah.
You experience, the cost is.
All right. Good looking animal there, Kate.
I'm surrounded by them.
If they get to be too much, just let me know and they can have a little respite in my place.
They'll come down and visit. So come down and
I'll do
visit.
that too. Yeah. Just because they have additional talent here in the room. Ed or Chief, any feelings on the building inspection thing?
I've had interaction with the building folks on occasion, and, I think it's great for the city to try to explore, nothing against the current people.
Yeah.
But to explore the potential of working with another community. Well, I think it's a great idea.
All right. Ed, anything?
Every inspector I've ever talked to has different opinions about everything that they look at. So,
No, we all take the same test. I think it'd be the same, right?
Yeah,
no, it's
what do you think?
yeah,
Right? Yeah, and frankly, sometimes it's luck of the draw, depends on who came out, right?
right. It would be interesting to find out whether or not if we go within the company, if they can get more done.
Yep.
Or have our own guy.
Right? Right. So,
Jonathan, oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I really would like to have somebody that understands working with our building situation, because we have so many, weirdo little houses here. Like, and particularly with our historic district, I think we're gonna see more folks coming into the historic district that want to do different things within the building, and people are on timelines. So I think that's one of the things that we need to, and I don't know how to do that. Like, are you familiar working with an older town with historic buildings, with buildings that there's no way they're gonna meet current building code?
Yeah, and I think one of the things we can do also that we can do better, we need to be able to, in a lot of our land use processes, have better referrals. We refer like things to our engineer and fire and police, which is great, but it would be great to also have the ability to send referrals to the building department on even like something as simple as a COA, just because maybe a COA modifies a building in a way that makes it structurally unsound or something. Like, having a building department just be able to look at those as one extra body would be helpful. I mean, we rely on fire a lot here for that, and I think you guys are awesome, but just having another avenue for that is helpful, I think, because a lot of these things are not straightforward. Like, ADA accessible path to a restroom, it needs to be within 500 feet, basically, a restroom, which makes our Citizens Park restrooms super important, because it means that a lot of those businesses can continue in their current use. And that's something that you need to know about Idaho Springs and historic downtown to really effectively do your job here. And there's a million things like that about Idaho Springs. I'm sure it's like that in every city, but it's for sure like that here. So I think that there's some questions that we can pose to these folks and look at their, where they're working. And especially if we're working with some places like Georgetown, because they're going to have very similar, issues and concerns to us. So
yeah.
we just need to vet that out a little bit.
Do we not have, can citizens not contact Safe Built right now and say, hey, can you tell me about this? Like, if I work on this building, what does it do to my neighbors? That kind of thing?
They certainly can. And I'll tell you a challenge that happens in planning and in building departments is I'll get a call that says, can I put a hot air balloon on the inside of my house and make it not have walls anymore? And I'm like, well, if you can show me that you can do it safely in building code and it doesn't violate our, historic guidelines and that kind of thing. But oftentimes staff, and I'll say it for Safe Built too, they get put into situations where maybe there's not an application and there's a lot of hypothetical kind of situations. And that's something that we need to do as a city team. And that's something we can do with our website is just say, hey, we love ideas and we'll always talk to you about them. But if we don't have an application in front of us, it's very difficult for us to say for sure what you can do. So we've been trying to do that. And I think we've been, especially since Dylan has come on, we've been really working on trying to make sure people know where the guidelines are a little bit better. So it's more like a crosswalk instead of having to hold somebody's hand when they cross the street, because we'll do that. But it's easier if, like you said, you just have access to the resources you need. And Safe Built does do that now, but they can't always give the best answer because they don't always know. But if we had somebody here, and that was like a little more into the contextual kind of ins and outs of the city, it just becomes easier and easier for them to answer this.
When is our contract with Safe Build up, or is that a rolling contract as well?
Rolling as well, and I don't know what our exit clause is, but it's probably very similar to the parking one. Carmen wrote both of them, so I'm guessing.
Yeah, and I off the top of my head, I can't remember if it's like 60 or 90 days, but I'm close.
Right. So are we looking to get this done before our busy season?
I don't think there's quite as much pressure as on the parking situation, but we do want to try to it would be nice to be able to build this up before we start budget conversation, so we know kind of what we need to put into the budget for next year.
What would be next steps in terms of collaborating with the other municipalities?
Georgetown has been having some conversations along the same line as this, as us. And there has been some informal conversation about whether or not this could be something that could work, just really on a very high level. And so most likely, I think, and Mary, you might have different thoughts, but probably the next step would be to figure out where they are in that process and like where everybody else is in that process. We probably want to meet at the staff level to discuss that, and or maybe like high level stakeholders, and just figure out kind of what this could look like. And then what we'd probably have to do is sign some sort of IGA, which is like intergovernmental agreement. It's similar to what we did for the fire, like how the fire authority is managed. And it's basically just a contract between governments about how they operate in a certain situation. And it could even be that maybe we all agree to use a certain contractor, and that could be, it could be as simple as Georgetown's like, hey, I want to use the same contractor, and then we modify our contract if it doesn't go fast enough. But that's probably what it would be. And we probably need to make sure that Georgetown had direction from their board of trustees, and then whomever else is going to participate would want to go through the same process. And so we probably just need to check on where they are in those right
No,
now.
I 100% agree. Just one thing that makes it a little easier, even if it didn't go beyond Georgetown, if the county just said, we're not interested. I believe there's more than enough money currently, so we don't have to fight over appropriating more money from some other area. I mean, if we're giving up 100, I'll guarantee you Georgetown's giving up 60. That, I mean, combined, there's more than enough for somebody.
That sounds like a really good paying job.
Huh, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and in all honesty, that might have to be salaried at something lower so we can provide the benefit package and some expense for their office. But I do believe we don't have to fight about money. It seems like it's already there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I would agree. Even if the county is not this, even if this is just us in Georgetown, not only is there enough money, but I think there would be enough work too.
Yeah.
Yes.
And not only that, there's, possibly other opportunities to use that person. Jeremy, you'd be best to answer this in other avenues. Like, okay, it's a little bit of, you know what I'm saying? Like a little bit of a lag season. Here's what else we can have you do. I mean, that person could sit on our fire authority. That person, I'm just saying that there's lots of other options.
Well, the other advantage of having a person in-house is honestly for Zach's activities. When he's evaluating properties for ordinance violations and all that stuff, having a building official that works in the city and understands it becomes a resource for him to go, what do you think of this? Because we're going to do something out here, separate from here, but with him in the near future. But that's also a huge help.
For the lodge situation, they were involved in that too.
Yeah, for example, the lodge situation, a perfect example. The Argo Hotel building evaluation, the back wall has got some issues. We had them evaluate that for safety. When the building across the post office got hit twice. Of course, having that person official within the town makes a huge difference in response time, being able to work with that property owner on an almost daily basis to figure out what the resolution is. They get it fixed quicker. It doesn't become a long-term issue. All of that has, of course, occurred in the last couple of years here.
Yeah, I think you just sold it, Jeremy.
All right, does anybody have anything further before we adjourn? All right, well, I want to thank everybody. It's 6:47. I think we've covered everything pretty well. And I appreciate.
Thanks for letting us do it remote.
Yeah, hey, see you later.
Thank you.
Several questions.